Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. Very excited to get a guest on today, Dave Pelzer, who I'll bring into the conversation in a minute. Very famously wrote a book called A Boy Called It, but has done much work since then. Has been in the armed forces in the US, does some comedy, is a writer, and is currently looking at trying to turn that original, very, very sort of inspiring book into a film. So, without further ado, I'm just going to bring Dave in and welcome you. You're all the way over in California, I think, Dave, aren't you?
California. I was going to say good morning, but I think it's afternoon where you're at.
It's evening over here, but don't worry about it. It's this interconnected world that we live in now, mate. It's like, how does it all work? Since post-pandemic as well, we all discovered Zoom overnight. How did that happen? How had
Yeah,
nobody
Zoom did
ever heard
very
of it
well.
before? Sorry?
No, Zoom did very well during the pandemic, and then for comedy drama, The Lion King, not The Lion King, The Tiger King
The
was a
Tiger.
big COVID hit here in the
Was it?
States. It was so, like, I can't believe they said that, or that's their lifestyle. I'm going, oh my goodness. So that kind of relieved a lot of that pressure from COVID.
Was the
That
Tiger King was a television series, was it? Or something?
Yeah, it was with Netflix, and it was just absolute all the elements of craziness, and
Was
the
it?
and the and this the cast per se,
Yeah.
unbelievable. You could not make this up.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan could not do this.
I have to say, I don't connect with those things. I sort of like my use of television and entertainment is more like chewing gum because my life seems so serious. I just want something that switches my head off, to be honest. And maybe that's
That
what
would be the Tiger King. If you
would
have
it. Okay,
Jello, just
I'll
watch the Tiger
check
King
it
and
out.
watch it in slow mo.
Well, good. Welcome. I'm really grateful that you've joined us. I remember reading your original book many, many years ago and being very touched by it. And it's quite a dark story, but we're not going to dwell upon that. But we hopefully will go through your life a little bit and get to where you're currently working on and the sort of latest books. I'm interested. I didn't know this about you, but you've done some comedy. Is that right?
Yeah. It's kind of a weird thing. When I was in foster care,
Yeah.
when I was rescued and placed in foster care, I really didn't speak very well because I wasn't allowed to
Yeah.
speak
Yeah.
in the situation at my mother's house. So pronouncing things and try to put words together into a sentence. And I used to escape seeing movies.
Yeah.
And because I was a foster kid and I was very small for my age, and I got beat up a lot in
Yeah.
junior. I mean, it was so weird. I was supposed to stand at a square at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when school is dismissed so I can get beat up. If I wasn't standing on the square and Tony was looking for me, I got beat up.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in movies, my friend took me, I used to see a lot of Walt Disney movies. My friend just picked me up by the collar and says, we're going to see something else. We're going to sneak in. And I saw like Inspector Clouseau, the Pink Panther,
Yeah.
and, and I would just watch how the actor moved. And then I'd start to imitate his voice. Yes, I've been looking for the dog in this room with the film, but of course you knew that. And then, of course, the Clint Eastwood series of Dirty Harry.
Yes.
And one time, how was your weekend, Smells Pelzer? Hey, you talking to me? Well, are you punk? And then I got picked up, but his friend said, oh my God, do that again. And I would have blood gushing from my nose, still trying to Clint Eastwood's voice.
Yeah.
So I kind of, jumped into that and used it as a foray to, just leaving myself of getting beat up all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I
And
think.
comedy's great, because you can take a bad situation
Yeah.
and kind of make it lighthearted. I used that when I went to Iraq, and I was a former fire captain, and we use that a lot. When things were kind of going bad, and they say the more you laugh, the healthier you could become mentally and physically, and you can sleep better. Because I
Yeah.
think here in the States, you're seeing there's chaos in the States. It's just amazing. School shootings, our politics are just crazy. So I would, what I used to do. I remember I met President Reagan before he passed, and he actually put his arm around me and said, "Do me." And I didn't know what the president was saying. He says, "I heard you do my voice. Do me." And I was so nervous, I couldn't do his voice. He says, "Okay, can you do president?" Bush Senior. I said, yes, Mr. President. He says, okay, I'll do Reagan, you do Bush. So I
Great.
swear to God, he went into character and he's like, clearing his voice. And
Right.
I'm going, too many scad missiles there, too many, 1,000 points of light. Okay. And it was very interesting. And, I've met people, and that's the first question he asked me, says, can you do my voice? Because my voice is fantastic. And you have to be macho, you have to be strong to do my voice, the Pelzer. Okay, I say, oh, okay. Good.
Would you have imagined that, Dave, when you were a little kid in foster care, that one day you'd be talking to presidents and stars? I mean, that's quite a meteoric rise.
It's not per se people of name recognition. It's I really think in me, and we'll talk about this. I study psychology quite a bit. I study like Walt Disney or Chuck Yeager, Robin Williams, Harry Truman. And I also study people that are kind of on the darker side, like Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma domestic terrorist. And I'm always looking at what makes people tick. And out of all the things I've read, I think I lived so many adventures. I mean, I was in the basement for many years, as you know, and I didn't speak very well, didn't have a lot of coordination. I was always hunched over. And yet I was allowed to fly for the Air Force. I was stationed at Mildenhall.
Extraordinary. Yeah.
For the SR-71 program. I was a mid-air refueler. And you got to have some coordination for that. And, or I didn't speak. And I used to speak a little Russian, a little German, a little Japanese. Or I didn't speak and to do in-service training on psychology and resilience for kids. Or, I would read books in the bottom of the basement, and adventure stories, Robinson Crusoe, Man in the Iron Mask. And yet I was allowed or blessed to write 9 books. And I think I had one time, 4 books simultaneously on the New York Times bestseller list, which is just crazy, and we had the #1 book in the United Kingdom, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
And then when I retired, I became a fire captain.
I know a little bit about story because I remember reading the book and being very moved by it, and was very excited to get you on because I'm fascinated by how it is that some individuals transform experience, which is what you've done, because I think those stories of transformation are jewels. They are gold for the rest of the world to understand, because people can begin to learn from them for themselves. And so, but I guess there may well be some people who don't know that bit of your backstory. So do you mind just telling us, again, I don't want us to dwell on it, but just a little bit about that story as a child and growing up. And again, I just want to keep it as light as possible, as you do, because I don't particularly want to trigger anybody or anything like that. And it's not really about that story, but I think it is remarkable, the transformation, and I think it's more the counterpoint to where you are now, if you see.
Okay, let me try to answer your question. One, it's amazing that I can say the word ladies in Washington State and I've triggered people. Oh my gosh. And I think I'm at the age and stage that I don't want to upset anybody in any way. But the reality of life is, I mean, there's a story, a line in a movie, World War II veterans really fighting with the Germans. And the sergeant goes to the young boy, he says, you know what? Talking about history is easy. Making history is deadly. So there is some goo in life. And my goo was, for whatever reason, my mother was very, very sick. And she somehow selected me as her target child. And I was horribly abused to the point that I lived in the bottom of the basement and slept on an old army cot. I was a family slave. I was invisible. And there was a lot of physical abuse. And I had to learn at a very early age that I'm going to have to basically fend for myself. My father was a firefighter, but basically just checked out psychologically and emotionally. My brothers were not allowed to talk to me for fear of retribution for my mother's craziness. And I just, for me, my story, I think, particularly with the child called It, was never about abuse, but about resilience. And I remember years later when I was in foster care, I've always had these tumblers in my life that came together at the precise time that I needed help the most, whether it's spiritually or physically and so forth. And at age 14, I've been in foster care for about 1.5 years. And this psychiatrist states in front of my foster mother and in front of my beautiful social worker, there's just no chance for David. He was isolated too much. He doesn't have the necessary tools. He can barely tie his shoes. He can't form a sentence. There's no chance that he's going to make it. And he actually predicted, and that was the gall of it all, was that I would be in jail or dead by the time I was like, 18, 20 years, years old. And I just remember, and this is important for your listeners, I remember thinking to myself, and by coincidence, I think my social worker gave me a jab and said the same thing. If I can survive all that I did,
yes, quite,
I need help without any training. What can I not possibly do? And I remember at age, I think 9, I was stabbed by accident. It wasn't premeditated, like being burned or so forth. I was stabbed by accident. And days later, because I was not allowed to go to the hospital for fear of exposing a secret, I had to clean my wound out. And that was very difficult for me. I mean, I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, and it's just this burning sensation. And afterwards, I thought, oh my God, I physically crawled back to the base of the stairs where I was supposed to sit on top of my hands in case mother opened to check on me. And I remember I fell asleep, and I just kind of believe I had this little Superman fantasy that I can fly through the air. And that's a fantasy that really about psychology. You're flying away from danger, or you're flying to a safety zone. And a lot of kids escape, that escapism.
Yeah.
I kind of thought, okay, I'm ugly on the outside. I smell. When I would go to school before I was rescued, sometimes kids would throw up because I smelled so vile.
Yeah.
I had waxed yellow skin. It was just terrible. I was eating out of garbage cans, for goodness sakes. And yet to have the life that I do now, my biggest thing is clean sheets. When I was stabbed, I thought, oh my God, we're going to the hospital. She can't hide the secret. This is finally over. That's it. But she was a nurse before she married my father, and she knew how, basic first aid. And to this day, I have to tell you, if I had like the Elon Musk money or Oprah money, I would have clean sheets every day.
Quite,
and it's almost like there's a movie called Castaway with our good friend Tom.
Yes.
And he's back from the island, and they're giving him a big party, and there's all this food, mountains of food. And he looks at it and goes, wow, such a waste. He says, what do you think about this party? What do you think? And he says, you know what? I'm happy to be here. You know why? I have ice.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. Because if we look at the bigger picture of this, COVID humbled all of us. It leveled the playing field. And I try to be an optimist and say, every day that we don't have COVID, every day our kids come home from school without a massive shooting, that's a great day. So I always try to do small little things in my life to either be happy or to try to be of service to other folks. And that's what you kind of saw.
Is that something you learned as a child as well? Because of this ability to fantasize and imagine, that kept you going?
Yeah, because as a kid, I didn't understand in the beginning why I was such a horrible child.
Of course, yeah.
Because I was brainwashed, of course. And I would do the chores as fast as possible to possibly get something to eat, but more importantly, to be recognized that I was real, I existed, and I wanted so desperately to be returned back to the family fold. And that's why, again, if I stole a little bit of bread and it had a little bit of peanut butter, I would just savor it. Yeah. And I think a lot of people right now, particularly in the States, they want everything so fast. They want it all right now, and they complain. And I'm going, whoa, slow down. It's a beautiful day. We're doing fine.
So you develop the capacity for gratitude, understanding what you do have rather than what you don't have.
Yes. And especially because I'm a little bit older than you, I'm sure. But I mean, there's so many turns I could have made in the wrong direction. Of course, I made a lot of mistakes in life, a lot, and I own that.
Sure.
But I try to just say to other people, like, okay, like if you're having a bad day, it's only one day. It's only for the moment. But if you kind of put yourself in a pathway, you do every day to have gratitude, to be humbled, to pay it forward and be nice to other people, because I see so many folks are just so upset. Or what is very sad for me here in the States is to see people who I call the walking dead. They're alive, but they're mentally, their brain is just shut off.
And I know what you mean.
They're not happy. And because I do believe this, and this is again important for your audience, you survive for a reason. You survive to be happy. If you had a bad childhood, be a happy adult. If you went through a bad divorce and you're blessed to have another relationship, savor that.
So,
if you have a bad childhood, make your children happy and put them on the path.
I think there's two like psychological truths coming out there. One is about altruism, and we know there's plenty of evidence that altruism is good for other people, definitely, but it's good for ourselves and being altruistic.
It makes me more healthier mentally and physically.
Absolutely. And it also improves the world. And sort of learning about that is quite powerful. The other point, I can't remember it, it'll come up later on, but
it's like, I'll forget.
It'll come back. There is these, that's it. The idea of seeing a bigger purpose behind your suffering. Some people talk about it in spiritual context, and some people talk about it in religious context, but being able to see that there's meaning and purpose when you're going through struggle, again, there's lots of evidence that is a really healthy psychological position to take.
Yes, and again, because you see in our news, every day there's always something.
Yes.
We say this in the fire department. The world will always be on fire. So you just don't want to be the fuse to ignite it further.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it's interesting just thinking about the shooting culture, which you touched upon. And let's talk about that. I told you I was over in California in the summer. I took my son with me for his first visit to California. I love California. It's one of my favorite places on the world. It really is. And I adore going there. And it was my first trip back there post-COVID. And thought I'd take my son and we'd have a father-dad thing, which we did. But I remember we needed to buy some extra bags to take on the plane back home because he got so many toys from Disney. So I needed extra luggage. And I went into one of those big shopping malls to buy some suitcases and stuff like that. And it was we were having such a hoot doing it. And the staff were great in the mall because it was all very funny. And then I got to that point, and it'd be interesting to know what you think about this. I got to that point where we're coming out of the mall. I suddenly went, this is where the shooters hang out. This is where they come to this type of place. And that thought went into my head. And it was I suddenly got very anxious about it and very protective towards my son and scooted out. And it is as a British person going to America, it is something there. And I wonder what that's like over there at the moment. Let's jump forward a bit, then we're going to go backwards and just sort of talk about what's going on right now. And your thoughts about it as somebody who is more than survived, is actually thriving in their life, and who theoretically should be a basket case and award somewhere, right? I mean, that's where the psychiatrist thought you were going to go. Okay.
Yeah, but and that was, again, I was 14 when that happened. But I developed my building blocks, at age 4, when my mom pulled my arm out of the socket by accident and walked away. And the next day she's crying in front of the doctor saying, my boy fell and I couldn't catch him. Oh my goodness. And told the same dramatic story to my father. It was in his firefighter outfit. And oh, you're never here. You don't understand what it's like for me. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself at age 4, this is BS.
Yeah.
Because my mother's story was she heard me screaming and she jumped out of her bed and put on her robe and opened the door and ran down the hallway and opened the door to the boys' room. And I slipped right through her fingers. Really? That's physically impossible. Yeah. But the fact at that stage, we all knew there was a secret and to keep our mouths shut. At age 8, when I was burned on the gas stove, my arm was burned. I had to decide for myself, I got to do something. And I kind of actually physically raised my arm with all the blisters, and it really hurt. And I said, I'm not going to quit. And I'm going to give everything I do from this moment forward my best shot. So I had all these building blocks, which is so imperative. And then I was able to use the building blocks.
Is that something about where you decide to have your focus? As a person, you choose your focus where you look and what you think about.
You have to think how the dynamic of how little children think. They're very black and white. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
That's it. Because people try to analyze and go, no, no, no. If a boy is hungry, he'll get food. If the girl wants water, she'll get the water. You can put a child in the room and in a matter of minutes or a half hour, they'll adjust. They'll make a fort. They'll take a nap. You and I go into a room without our cell phone, we'll go crazy. We got to have this now attitude, save me attitude. So all I had to do was form these building blocks. And then again, I used them in foster care to survive that. Or my work ethic, I was working over 20 to 40 hours a week in junior high, and then 40 to 60 plus in high school. Because I thought, I'm do the stupid teenager thing. I had to focus on having money because I was fearful of being homeless. Then you go to the Air Force. They didn't want a high school dropout with low scores and who was in foster care. One guy said, "Did you murder someone? Why are you in foster care?" I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I got in by the skin of my teeth, and I was a swamp cook from 3 a.m. to sometimes 9 p.m, 5-6 times a week in the swamps of Florida. Yet I shimmied my way into becoming an air crew member for your SR-71, for goodness sakes. So I'm saying these were building blocks, and this is important too. I've never met anybody who came up to me and cried and wailed and says, "I'm a victim of cancer." They said, "I survived cancer. I fought cancer." So it's a different switch. And everybody that, that at least I admire, they overcame something dramatic and they were able to use it as a building block, whether it's Elvis Presley, whether it's Harry Truman, Walt Disney, and Bancroft. There's always a back story on the good side or the bad side. Again, those building blocks. So I was able to use that. And we live in a society where we have to be more aware, whether it's a possible shooting or aware of saying 6 to 8 feet for someone who's coughing and blowing their nose constantly. That's the evolution of life where we're at right now. It's almost like when I see the politicians go at it, blah, 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 blah. They forget the mantra. The mantra is being of service to others. So all I have to do is watch the news for a few minutes and shut it off. I don't want to contaminate,
No, I totally agree with you on that one. I'm always advising people, just be very wary of what you allow in, particularly these days. There's so much competition to get your attention, and the methods have become much darker, I think, to be honest.
Well, fear sells, because I remember when Bush Jr. was running for the second term, and every 30 seconds, terrorism. Oh my God, we got to have this guy in the White House because he'll save us. We want Superman to save us, Wonder Woman to save us. And I say, well, you have to kind of save yourself first. And then because the thing is, sex sells. Anything sexy sells. But I do think in my country, there was a slight shift, and it was very small, but I noticed it. We had a divorce that was scandalized on TV. They covered everything on this divorce with Johnny Depp and his former wife. America was busy, switched it off. It didn't make ratings because we really have more important things on our plate that need our attention. And if we don't take care of things, whether it's global warming or the homelessness situation, it's going to get totally out of control. So all I'm trying to do is use my time to assist others to have a productive life. That's it.
So tell me about, so you make it through foster care, you get into the Air Force, and all of that in itself is quite an extraordinary achievement. They didn't want me. I remember I would go to the recruiter's office 4 or 5 times a week just to shine their shoes for free. I grabbed all the brochures. I would act like I'm going to left, right, trying to weasel in. And they said, "Get out of here." And somehow I was shining somebody's shoes, and a mathematical question was asked. And I somehow came up with, the guy had this little calculator, which is big as a house back then. And I somehow just spurted out the idea. And he says, "Oh, you're a smart kid." I said, "Yeah, on the inside, I'm super smart, beautiful mind. I can do this." And I got in. And because I was about to be homeless myself, because I was basically aged out of foster care,
God bless my foster parents allowed me to stay there for room and board, what have you.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I was in, and they said, okay, take the crappiest job you can, get in, get good scores, get in better shape. And maybe in 3 to 4 years later, you can cross over to something else.
And
I've always been ignorant.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I don't know if it's the same in the US, but it's certainly in the UK. The armed forces is often a route out of trouble for young men. That it gives you structure and organization and purpose.
Because to me, and this is important, it was a family unit.
Right.
A family unit, whether it's dysfunctional or violent behind the gun per se. And I just, for me at age 18, I thought, oh my God, 4 years. Oh my God, I don't know. This is such a long commitment. But now you and I, 4 years is like 2 days, for goodness sakes.
Absolutely.
And I was just so thrilled the first time I put on a flight suit, you know, and you know, I was working out, so I had a good chest or whatever, and my arms, and I thought, oh my God, this is the elite of the elite, the SR-71 and the stealth fighter program. And and the joke was, and this is kind of a neat thing, when I was in foster care, I just loved airplanes. I studied every airplane. I can tell every rivet. And I wrote a letter to a guy named Kelly Johnson. Now, you might know who that name. He designed the 104, the U-2, and the SR-71.
Wow.
So when I finally got in the program, you know, he had moved on. But I thought, oh my goodness, again, those tumblers in life that somehow connect at the right time, at the right place. And that's the thing too. I tell my young firefighters, I say, live a grand adventure, so to tell a good story. You know, so you want to be optimistic. You want to
and
try.
It is important, isn't it? The sort of narrative that we give to ourselves.
Yes.
Really
and you have to do it through what I call quiet leadership.
Right.
I don't know if you heard this, but there was this amazing over-the-top series, a reality series called Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
I've never actually watched a single episode of it.
Oh, please, you should stop what you're doing to see this. And you want to talk about family values in the opposite way.
Yeah, right.
The thing is, the mother's character always wanted to party with her sexy daughters, you know, from 4 in the afternoon to 3 in the morning. I'm going, you got it wrong. Your job is quiet leadership. You're supposed to raise young adults to be functional and you know, to hopefully pay it forward. So I think right now, particularly, this is going to be a big Christmas for us and you, because we saw the travel was like, I think, 13% more than pre-COVID. This is so important for us to relax and to have fellowship with our families. It's not about gifting and so forth. It's about, okay, pay homage to your higher power, pay homage to your family, and just enjoy it. Hence Christmas.
Yeah. And you're using terms that I recognize from recovery groups. Are you in recovery groups as well?
Oh, I'm not in recovery, but I've actually taught. I work with folks who are new in program.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And it's amazing because I've studied psychology. I have a degree in criminal justice. I know aeronautics, but I learn more from folks who have had the rocky road. You know, I love the line, you do you, I do me. My job is to keep my side of the street clean. That's a heavy statement. Or, you know, excuse me, do the one day at a time. Because I have a dear friend, and we were younger back in the day, and he shared with me that he was in program, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, you know what? I love a glass of wine, you know, and once in a while I love a great martini at the Savoy restaurant, which that's where the martini was invented, ladies and gentlemen. I said, I cannot imagine you not having a drink for the next 40 years. He says, you're looking at it wrong.
Yeah, it's just a day.
Keep that goal. You can almost touch it rather than, I'm going to conquer Mount Everest. No, you're not. Stop it. Don't even try. Because in my country, a lot of people think once they get the $1 million, once they get married, once they get the car, once they get the kid, once they get all these things,
then I'll be happy. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Stop it. I'm having
crazy idea. It's that thing using the mountain metaphor. I often say to people, I wonder what you think about this. You don't want to be looking at where you've got to go. You just want to be reflecting on, well, I've done another step. I'm a bit further along. And
exactly.
I tell people,
yeah, look where you came from,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
be joyful and respectful of that. Because again, we live in an age, particularly my son, who's now in his 30s,
Wow.
you know, and the
Well done,
generation,
Dave.
everything is so instantaneous, it's so fast, so furious, in a sense.
Well, just
And
well
that's
done
why,
though. I'm being a successful dad who brought up children from your background is, being able to sort of give them what they need to get on in life is extraordinary. Can you tell me, when did you first think, right, I want to tell this story, I want to start writing, I want to start communicating, I've got
well,
something to offer to other people?
it's, I don't know if I'm a sadist in a sense, because I really don't like writing. Put that in quotes. Pelzer says he
Okay.
doesn't like writing because
Well,
I was
here's the secret. I've never met a writer who actually enjoys it because it's hard.
oh please.
It's really hard
I
work.
remember I was talking to a friend of mine. He wrote The Christmas Box, Richard Paul Evans.
Yeah,
Beautiful man. I'm
yeah.
kind of like the Clint Eastwood of Christians. He's Jimmy Stewart all the
Right.
way.
Okay. Okay.
I was like just reading something, and seeing, whatever, and typing in a letter here or there. I talked to him for 20 minutes, one chapter done. Whoop, I'm like, oh my God, I hate you. Because writing for me is like crawling on glass. You're
Yeah.
looking,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
my particularly child called it, because when I write, I feel like I'm a movie director. I'm
Yeah.
looking at I'm looking at the sets. I'm looking at what are you saying without saying?
Yeah.
What's the visual input here? And that's why Child Called It. I think it was a very fast read because I deliberately wrote it as an 8-year-old boy, because 8-year-old boys are very fast, very visual, very intense. So I wanted to keep boom, 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 boom. And that's why, like in the last book, Return to the River,
Yeah.
I felt like I was Christopher Nolan, because Christopher, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but he's a mathematician.
Oh,
He's
okay. I didn't know that. Right.
I mean, everything is about math. Like if he says something here, he says it 3 times, and then at the end it ties in. Like the movie Interstellar, they had so much math, and that was real math in the background.
Yeah.
Or if you see Oppenheimer, which I think is going to get every Oscar except for costumes, we'll give that to Barbie. All right, Barbie, thank you, get out. But what I try to do with Return to the River was open up the lens and discover for the reader, like, why did my mom go crazy?
Yeah.
What was the issue with my father and myself? And have these threads and tie them in nicely, in a sense. So that's, to me, The Child Called It originally, and I've said this 1,000 times, was supposed to be a thank you letter from my teachers that rescued me.
Yeah.
Because back in my day, there weren't any penal codes to protect children
Yeah.
or those trying to protect children, because they thought when they called the police, we've lost our jobs. See you later. Bye-bye. Because my mother at the same time would always threaten the school principal. I'm going to sue you. Don't you put your nose in my business. Because there was a teacher that you saw in A Child Called It that suddenly disappeared because my mother had her fired for intervening in a private family matter.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was write a thank you letter, after like 10 years and 15 years. And I said, okay, give yourself 20 years since you've been rescued, give them a flower and a letter. And somehow it just became the small book. And again, the book was printed in 93. And I'm very proud to say this. The first copies were given to my teacher on the exact day
Oh, wow.
of
That's
my 20th anniversary of my rescue. Because the thing about me is I kind of act affable, I'm kind of easygoing, but I'm really just, I will burrow. I will stand my ground. If I really believe in something, I'm going to do it. And I always am kind of like the quiet romantic. I have photos of people I've met, and that's a nice thing, but they're not in the frame. They're in the photo box, which is great. But I have a beautiful photo on the 20th anniversary of one's holding A Child Called It, and one's holding the program of the 10 outstanding young Americans that I got before the book on 20 years. And for many years, and this is important, I would always revisit the teachers and the schools, and it became like a half-day event. And the last time I was there, it became like a 7-day Pelzer Palooza. I'd go to the juvenile hall, do work with the nurses, do all the schools and fundraisers, and I would give them flowers. And one bouquet was actually bigger than my teacher, Miss Constant. She's a
Yeah.
small little Greek lady. But
Again, it's
God, it was
interesting for me. Again, it's interesting that what you choose to focus on, and it is a choice that you're making, is the fact that you were helped as opposed to the amount of time you weren't helped for, and you have that gratitude and that focus, which I think is.
well, I
It's
wouldn't.
so,
The thing was that this is important. And a lot of people, I think, when you see an action movie, you're just looking at the explosions, and then you see it again and understand the premise of the antagonist, the protagonist. I really thought that Friday that I was taken away suddenly. I really thought that weekend I was poised to really just. My brothers were going to visit my uncle for the weekend, and my parents had separated. And I really thought that was the weekend she was going to kill me. So again, timing.
yeah.
It was just, I mean, looking as a kid, I was always thinking, okay, steal food from the garbage cans in school, or steal food here, or do this or do that. And now, being in the military and being to war zones, or I've done rescue work at Katrina or Joplin, or being a fire captain, and 80% of our calls are medical. And sometimes things do not go well. So I understand the value of life, but looking at it now as a grandparent, and having an adventurous life, I'm part of me for saying the words, but I was so damn lucky.
Yes. Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah.
And again, I get the encouragement from, a social worker or from foster parents or from other people, strangers, that would just somehow I was able to go that next step. And that's so important.
Can you tell me what it was like? I mean, because you became very well known, and you still are very well known. And how many books now have you written?
The 9 Return to
Nine books. I mean, it's extraordinary. And each book, you've exposed more of your soul, I guess.
Different parts. Because if you look at A Child Called It, it's from basically 3 to 12, and then the Lost Boy was like from 12 to 18, and every book has a different lens to it. Because with the Lost Boy, the second book, I thought to myself, there's an alien living on planet Earth.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak, he doesn't hold any currency, and how does this alien assimilate, become per se normal? And then what I liked about the books too, it was a tribute excuse me, it was a tribute to social services and foster care.
Yeah.
So there's always a story within a story. And then we did A Child Called It, The Lost Boy, and then A Man Named Dave.
Yeah.
So that would open up, working with the Air Force, becoming a father, trying to be a good father. And it set the stage when I was doing a great deal of volunteer work. I was able somehow, I don't know how I did it, but I received the State Volunteer of the Year for California while I was still active in the Air Force.
Yeah, right.
So there's always a different, it's almost, I don't want to say Hunger Games or Star Wars, when you see these characters develop as from teenagers who are lost to adults who have a leadership role in a sense. So I was, and it's weird because I always think maybe a good 8 months to a year before I even think about another project.
Yeah.
And the last book, Return to the River, usually it takes me a year and a half to write a story after I think about it for 6 to 8 months to a year. And then it takes another year or so to really, really narrow it down and edit. I did from start to finish Return to the River, I think in 6 to 8 months.
Wow. That's impressive work rate.
And it was very, what I like about Return to the River, it's a haunting love story about family dynamics.
Yeah.
That I especially, after the age, like my son's going through it right now. He's looking at 40 and he's getting very nervous, going, son, 40 is nothing.
Yeah.
Long way. The river was a lot of self-inventory about my character trying to be at service with one district on the coast of California, then down to my beautiful Russian River in the middle of the world's pandemic, while I'm dealing with, the reality of my life, because I had 2 things that just almost shattered me during the middle of this situation. So it's always about, there's always something happening in your private life, even though the world around you might be crumbling, and you still have
That's sort of
keep
linked
it
to one of the
together.
questions I have, and there's two questions I have, which I'm really intrigued by about you. One is this public-private stuff, because you've made yourself very public around what most people would
Which
think.
I did not know at the time. You know,
Yeah.
no one can say, you know, because getting published in the States is extremely difficult. And autobiographical books, I mean, they flop. And yet to go from
And also
nothing.
let's be honest, an autobiographical book about a very
Yes.
dark experience, you know, it's not, you know, you can't walk into publisher's office and say, yeah, this will make loads, and they'll sort of, it's
And it's weird
hard
because
sell, that one. Yeah.
I remember a few years, maybe 10 years ago, 3 autobiographical books came out before Christmas. One by Arnold Schwarzenegger, 2 Pete Townsend from The Who, and then the other one, Neil Young, and they all flopped.
Yeah.
And I'm going, hold, Schwarzenegger flop? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, in the 80s, the 3 big names were Schwarzenegger, God, and Jesus, and God came in 3rd place. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was because to me, you know, and I get a little miffed when they say, oh, you're famous because of your books. I'd rather be more famous for the National Jefferson Award, for goodness sake, which is that's the pinnacle of public service awards. It's a lifetime achievement award. But I know some people, like even like Schwarzenegger, he wanted to get out of the loincloth and do comedy. And they says, you can't do comedy. You're too physically big.
Yeah.
And he says, trust me, I do that with Danny DeVito and Twins. So it's people try to put you in a box, which I understand. But at the same time, I know that I can do more or give more rather than you just wrote a little tattletale book.
Yeah. So part of it is that you manage that relationship with how people want to stereotype you, and you challenge it. The other question I've got, and I'm really intrigued by this, it's the relationship between, I mean, how much of life do you see like a film? You say your books are like a film. And I wonder about that. And I wonder about how much that was a protective factor for you in these experiences, being able to sort of understand it more filmically.
Well, it's weird because I've been reading books, again, since I was a child in the basement.
Yeah.
And there's some books that just don't grab you.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm looking, okay, why doesn't it grab me? Why does this grab me? You know, why do I like these type of films? Why don't I like this or that? Or what food I like or don't like?
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, if I can keep, because when I write, it's really never about me. I'm always thinking the reader puts themselves in the book. Like, Dave, don't go down that hallway. Don't open that door. Dave, look behind you. You know, you want to keep them engaged.
Yeah.
In a sense. And because I remember the first film I saw when I was in foster care changed my entire life.
Yeah.
And it actually had an input on my life many years later. And it was a film, it was filmed in Louisiana, and it had alligators. And I love alligators. And I just happened to do the report of the state. And it had adventure. And this man traveled all over the world to get the bad guys. It was done by Sir Roger Moore, called Live and Let Die, the James Bond series.
Oh yeah, I remember that film. It's a great film. When he jumps on the alligators and to
escape. Yeah, and that was done by Ross Kananga, the stunt guy for that. And that's the thing too. If I love something, I just chop it up and digest it. So what I would always try to do as a writer was, open the lens and keep it interesting. There was a guy called John Grisham. You might have heard of this guy.
Yeah, I do. I know him well.
I remember his character would walk into a room and there'd be 5 pages on he's looking at this artwork, or he's picking up a calculator, he's having a glass of milk, and which is boring stuff, but the way he wrote it was so engaging. I love
there's a very interesting apocryphal, I can never say that word, learning story in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is
a lot of writers spew. There's 2 types of writers. There's writers who have great flow of words. They know every syllable and put the comma here, hyphen there. And yet other writers like Grisham or Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and maybe a tiny bit of me, you know, I just want to tell a good story. And at the end of the day, you go, wow, a child called it, excuse me, not about abuse. It's about resilience.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that, having read it.
And then even the publishers at one time, they said, why is your book selling so well? It's so violent.
Mhm.
I'm saying you're looking at it the wrong way. Look at Rocky Balboa. It's a
Yeah.
very simple film. He knows he can never beat Apollo Creed. Yo, Adrian, I can't do it, because Creed's too much of a machine. He's got everything in his corner. He's got the muscles. He's got the experience. He's got sponsors all over the world. And this guy, he's from the wrong side of the track. Yo, Rocky. But we know he's going to take a hit. We know he's going to fall. But the fact that he gets up, in the bigger picture, he's not fighting for the title.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's fighting for Adrian's love. Adrian's love. There's always, I remember I saw The Dark Knight, and I love good action films. And I'm with a young lady, and she goes, This is the best action film I've ever seen. And I was sweating going, this is not an action film. This is a psychological thriller.
It certainly is. Yeah.
It's the line, some people want to see the world burn. I'm like, oh my God, because you can't deal with that evil. So I like when I see Terms of Endearment, and then, oh my God, Deborah Winger's dying. I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
So with certain films, you walk in, like Saving Private Ryan. I remember I watched everybody walk out of that movie. No one said nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were just, oh my gosh, I'm going to call my father. I'm going to call Uncle Joe. I'm calling my uncle in London. Oh my God. So with The Child Called It just, I did not plan it. I swear to God, it's just a simple book, but I knew I was onto something because when it was printed, you couldn't get it in any store. There was no distribution. So every one person that bought the book, we had an average of 40 people who read the book, and it's nice. Like I would come to your country, I swear to you, and there would be a queue of at least 300 or 400 people wherever I would go. And I would always do the same thing I did in the States. I give everybody 1 minute. I give everybody a hug. If they said, oh, your story inspired me or this, that, and the other, I said, well, God bless you. I'm thankful for that. And, be on your way and go in peace.
Yeah.
That's
your next step with this, you're saying that you're hoping that you'll get a film deal around this book now?
Well, that's if you make the list, that's what they do. They try to buy the rights to the book.
Right.
But we've been trying to make a Child Called It into the film since the late 90s. And for whatever reason, the project would drop out. And we were actually supposed to be in production this last fall, August, September. But we had the writer strike and the actor strike. And I think when things settle, they might do it, which is fine, because in my contracts, I love this. Anything you want special? Do you want a trailer? Do you want Skittles? I said, no, here's what I want. I want to do as many screenings in the public that we can. And number one, I want to make sure that we make it a donation directly into like the boys club or the girls club.
Quite exactly.
And then I said, what else do you want, Pelzer? I said, you know what I want? I want my teachers to walk the red carpet. I want them to be the celebrities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And unfortunately, two of my teachers have passed on. But I'm thinking, you know what? They have children. They will have the honor. Because if you really look at what I do, and I smile when I say this, I'm in a position that I can do a lot of good for people. I can make someone happy. I want other people to feel elevated. Because sometimes you see this in my states. You have some characters, it's about me, and me too. And I'm going, get out.
Yeah.
Get out,
So it's hopefully you'll start this production next year if there isn't another strike or another pandemic or whatever.
Well, I'm sure we'll get the political
something.
But here's the thing, and I've never put all my hopes in one basket. If it happens, great, because I can do a lot of fundraisers with the movie. I can make a difference, but if it doesn't happen, I'm happy and I'm fine.
Great.
Because I remember during my height of whatever, I would be on the road over 300 days a year.
You said this,
16
Air Force bases
a day, and I can't do that. And I cannot run a 5-minute or a 6-minute mile anymore. I used to be very quick. I'm kind of slowing down just a bit. And think about it. I was a firefighter at age 52. And then at age 55, I was a fire captain. And then with all the fires we had in California, and again, I was in 2 separate districts. I was just going like pong, going back and forth. And I'm kind of just slowing down a bit now because I have a grandson. He's 4.5.
Wow.
And
Congratulations.
when we're together, we get in a little bit of trouble. And his parents, they try to scold us. And I kind of point at the kid going, it wasn't my idea, it was his.
Yeah. Good. Listen, how do people sort of find out more about you? Do you have a website? Can you tell me what that is?
It's I think it's a simple site. I think it's called the Dave Pelzer website or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say this. I used to do internet radio. And one of my best things I did is I did a show live from Baghdad.
Did you really?
Oh my gosh. And I did some SNL spoof commercials.
Great. Brilliant.
But now I have a podcast show because ever since the pandemic, I saw so much politics interfering with medicine and everybody getting agitated.
It was
and again,
insane stuff.
Great people. I remember Edward R. Murrow, and I remember, oh my goodness, the gentleman from Oklahoma during the Depression. He would play guitar and tell people we're going to be fine. It's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a podcast show now since the pandemic, and we're doing pretty well with that because this way I can tell people, oh, try this, get some sleep, get exercise, don't get caught up in the bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's called the Dave Pelzer Show, and that's everywhere. I'm like the virus. I don't go away.
Well, I hope not. I definitely hope not. And I would encourage people, we are at the end of the show. I told you it'd fly by. It always does. So I'm just going to wrap us up. You stay there for a minute, Dave, while I just finish everything off. So I would encourage people to check out Dave's resources. It's really extraordinary story, but like you say, it's a story of resilience and it's a story of growth. And it almost makes me think, that metaphor of what's the name of that Buddhist flower? What's it called?
Lotus.
Is it the lotus? And there's
lotus.
A metaphor, isn't it, that the lotus is beautiful because it sits in shit, essentially.
Yeah, that is definitely the lotus.
And it gets nourishment from it. And it's really important, I think, as a metaphor for transformation of our lives. And I think, as you keep alluding to, a really useful way of thinking about life as it is now, because there are a lot of people who are trying to make hay, as we say, from the difficult situation around the world and being opportunistic about it. And actually voices like yours are much needed during times like this, because it's sensible, sane and healthy advice on how to stay grounded and stay focused on what I think of as pro-social engagement with each other. Kindness and happiness and growth and family and love and connection. And it's particularly special coming from you because you come not from that, but you've learned the value of it throughout your life. And it's an extraordinary sort of lesson to share with people. I'm going to say, you just stay there. I'm going to say goodbye to folks. And I'll see you at the next show. I can't remember who we've got on, but there's always somebody. They do tell me, but my memory isn't so great these days, but that's okay. And I want to wish you all well. Check out Dave. He's an amazing guy, and check out his books and check out his podcast. You will be blown away like everybody is. So bye-bye for now, folks.